Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavarai Tejasvinavadhikamastu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. It is evident that what brings one to the study of Vedanta is a sense of discomfort with the world, Jagat, with other jivas, very important. Jagat, jiva, and then what else is left? Ishvara, of course, with Ishvara also. It's very evident that there is a sense of discomfort centered on all these things. Jiva includes oneself too. One is upset at oneself, one is upset at the Jagat. There is a sense of discomfort, dis-ease with the Jagat, with oneself, and with the source of the Jagat. Because the Jagat is not self-standing. Obviously, it is being controlled by someone, and then that someone also comes under the purview, comes under this rubric of discomfort. And it is this discomfort, this sense of dis-ease that makes one run under the umbrella of Vedanta, where there is some, hope of no longer being chased by this one's own discomfort, really. And starting with the Upanishads and the secondary works of Vedanta, all the teachers in the parampara have made clear one thing, that Vedanta begins for you when this discomfort ends. This is one of the best catch-22s ever. It's like the village, what is that? One not so eligible bachelor in the village. And why is he not so eligible? Something is slightly wrong somewhere, Nobody quite knows what it is. It's not some kind of it's not fully developed enough to be considered a mental health issue. But yet, there's something funny there. And so no alliances are coming for this fellow. And then the parents are sad, frustrated, because the reputation is all over. Something is funny. Don't go with this alliance. Reputation precedes him, and then the parents take him to a doctor, Vidya. What does the Vidya say? Yeah, unfortunate for the woman, but this is what the Vidyas would say, perhaps. And perhaps there was some, logic to it, I don't know. Just, he'll be all right. After marriage and all, he'll be all right. Until he gets married, the madness won't go. And until the madness goes, he will not get married. This is what is called a classical catch-22. And so in Vedanta also, We have, even after saying the Shanti mantra to take off all impediments, we are looking at a very interesting and important impediment. What is that? You know, until the my sense of discomfort and dis-ease with the universe, with myself, with Ishvara, settled down, Vedanta cannot make an inroad, cannot, enter the heart. And then what? Conversely, until Vedanta enters the heart, this sense of dis-ease and discomfort will not stop. Where to start then? you know? Pujya Swamiji put it in his own way very well. He used to say, spirituality begins when you stop blaming others for your predicament and when you stop blaming yourself for the predicament. Because this is all what happens. Either you blame yourself or you blame somebody else. Or you blame the stars. Shani is always in the wrong place, and he stays for 7.5 years. Very bad. And then, Venus is not well placed. It's called horoscope. Yeah. The whole scope of horrors unleashed at birth for me. And so, this is something which is, which is important to see that it's a habitual pattern that is associated with human existence. No other animals complain. The buffalo doesn't complain. Why am I so tamasic? No, it's happy. Stopping all the traffic on a busy Indian road, it's happy. Totally stress free. It becomes the cause of stress for everyone else. It doesn't complain. How come I'm not like the gazelle, kind of a deer that jumps and very nicely, so graceful? Why am I so tamasic? It doesn't complain. Again, a hippo is not, self-conscious. I think I need to go on a keto diet. It doesn't say that, you know. And a dog is neither worried about its degree or its pedigree. It's not worried about that. All these pedigrees are for the owner, not for the dog. It doesn't say, oh, I have come from this line of pure breed. I'm a pure bred Brahmin dog. No other, no other Sankara mix up has taken place. It doesn't have that kind of a, feeling and identification. It's only in the universal human predicament. And what is this human predicament? Dosha darshana. This is the human predicament. And the human predicament is to keep on seeing the imperfection in oneself, in others, all the way up to Ishvara, everywhere. And because of that, one's life actually, it becomes miserable. How can it not? How can where is the chance of even being happy in such a situation? And, but then why is it like this? As Vedantins, we can give a lot of reasons. We can say this is because of ajnana. What kind of ajnana? Atma ajnana. We know the answers, all pat, they come because we've been listening. Atma ajnana. Because of ajnana, I consider myself to be what I'm not. And because of that, I mistake myself to be finite, and therefore I, you know, I'm not satisfied with anything that is there that is finite, etc., etc. We know this. Therefore, I find fault. You know, we have a logic. There is a reason for everything, and this, proclivity, this ability to keep on seeing imperfections in and around oneself is a mixed blessing. It's a blessing. It's a mixed blessing, or a blessing in disguise, so to speak. Because, on the one hand, it stops me from understanding or having the desire to see the truth of myself. It thwarts the desire, you know, it distorts the ability to assimilate this knowledge, what to mention, to live this knowledge. It does a lot of, it does a whole number on me. Still, it is very, very important because it pushes one to find a solution. Because if everything, is satisfactory, if everything is all fine, then there's no need to look for anything. Somebody said ignorance is bliss. I always maintain ignorance of ignorance is bliss. If I don't know what I don't know, then I'm happy being whoever I am, just like the animals. There is no, there is no push towards any kind of introspection, self-discovery, nothing, because I don't feel anything is wrong with the self. So even though this constant self-loath, self-judgment, self-criticism, which also, bleeds into and, leaks into criticism of others. So even though this constant self-criticism, self-critique, self-judgment is difficult to live with, it gives me the ability to what? To find ways to overcome it. This is what the whole thing is. And so that is something which is, Vedanta is like that. Everything is never one thing. You always have this, it's both a blessing and a curse. The human predicament is both a blessing and a curse. It's a curse because I cannot stand it. I cannot stand for finding fault with myself. If somebody says, you just have to say why. Because I want to be what? Perfect. That's why. I want to be perfect. I desire perfection in myself. I desire perfection in others. I expect perfection from others. And I look for perfection in Ishvara. I look for perfection in the Jagat. And then what? This is why, I cannot stand imperfection. It's almost like the jiva is hardwired for looking for perfection. And then there's a little tap on the shoulder. It's Vedanta tapping. What does it say? What would it say? You are what you seek. You are already perfect. No, how can that be? Very true. That is true. You're already perfect. There's nothing to seek. You're already fine. And this, of course, is taken with a little bit of Shraddha. Because Shraddha here means trust pending understanding. It's not fully trust yet. Okay, I'll take your word. You tell Vedanta, okay, I'll take your word. Maybe I am what I seek. And But what about the Jagat? It is so imperfect. Look, here there is a war, there is poverty, there something else is happening, and here here there is corruption, over there is bribery. So what do? We can't, what Vedanta would say is that we slowly grow into seeing the perfection in all this. But that there is a subjectivity. There is a subjectivity in classifying something as perfect or imperfect. There is a subjectivity, there is something that is based on, one's own, what shall we say now, raga and dvesha, what else? One's own desires is causing this subjectivity. So everything is mediated by one's own desires. And because of those desires, there are certain expectations of others, of the world, even of Ishvara. Ishvara should give me this, of the Guru, the teacher should be like this towards me. All these things. And so this is coming from some, you have to understand this, some deep, unfulfilled, sense within oneself, an insecurity centered on oneself. And this is what has to be addressed. So in order to absolutely remove insecurity centered on the self, one needs exposure to Vedanta. I heard, very happy to hear that you've almost finished the Bhagavad Gita in the home study here. So proud of you, very nice. I was telling the people, when they told me this, I said, do a nice puja and have a celebration when you finish the last one, And when you finish the last words of the last verse, what we do is we go back and read a few lines of the first portion to show that everything is a cycle. So after this kind of an exposure is needed to get to the place of a certain relative security. And this relative security alone, what does it do? It allows Vedanta, the message of Vedanta, that there is nothing wrong with you to operate. That you are one with Ishvara, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not. This is the message of the Mahavakya. This is what it says. There's nothing more to it. This is how it is. And so therefore, the teaching, a certain amount of exposure gives this kind of a relative security to be able to study fully and to contemplate upon the nature of the self as free of all kinds of, problems. And if the self is free of all kinds of problems, the Jagat is also free of all kinds of problems. How can the Jagat, Jagat means what? Jagat starts with not out there, starts with your own body, mind, sense complex. What you call the self, powered by the ahankara. So, if the self is free, that means the Jagat is free of imperfections. And the one who made the Jagat, Ishvara, is also free of imperfections. Because it's all one infallible whole. So this kind of a exposure is needed to banish this self-critique. Easier said than done. Because the ahankara is very, very tricky, sneaky fellow. What does it do? It makes compartments, Just like, what happens, you do your morning puja. Morning puja involves, let us say, lighting of one lamp and offering some dry fruits, and then, waving the lamp, and, that much is morning puja. And after that, what? I enter into the zone of no puja. Okay? Then again evening. Evening puja. I enter into the puja zone. And then that's why it is marked. Usually it's a little closet in the house or a cupboard. Or if people have a big house, it could be a small room in the thing. Puja room. Puja zone. That's why I'm not saying room. Because sometimes it's a cupboard. And so it's a puja zone. So you are in the puja zone, and then you are what? Out of the puja zone. This is how we lead our lives. So when you go to office, you are what? Work zone. Little harder for people who work from home, because they have to constantly keep drawing the boundaries of the work zone, for themselves and for everyone else who is keeping on trampling on those boundaries. You have to be kind of strict. But nonetheless, this is a work zone, and then what? This is the non-work zone, correct? Relaxing zone. Then this is just like you have rooms in the house, living room. Of course, you live in every room, but it's somehow for some reason called living room. And bedroom and kitchen, eating room, dining room, sleeping room. Like this, the mind also is so nicely compartmentalized. Puja zone. And then puja zone means what? Suddenly, and all kinds of stripes come out. Zebra avatara takes place. And then what? After that, no puja zone. Puja zone finished. Work zone, I enter the work zone, I have a certain demeanor, and I know exactly what I have to do, and I just get into that. I can shut out the world, and then what? No work zone. And like this is how we lead our lives. And now, in the beginning, Vedanta is just wonderful. You feel like jumping up and down. You feel like hugging everyone you see, whether they want it or not. And then you feel like dancing on the road because this is something such a relief to this. It's like a wonderful, standing under a waterfall after coming out of a volcano. It's like that, so much relief. But then the creepy ways of this zoning, creeps in. The ahankara takes over Vedanta. Whereas, what should happen? Vedanta should take over the ahankara. Yeah. And, it doesn't need to decimate it. It's not about decimation or removing the ahankara. It's about making it, lightened of the burden of carrying all these wrong identifications. I'm as good as the body, I'm as good as the mind, I'm an idiot, I'm foolish, etc., etc. That is what the ahankara is, what needs the teaching. In fact, Adi Shankara asks in one of the texts, who is needing the teaching? Very interesting question. Is the body needing the teaching? You are the whole. Say no, so we can move on. Okay. So, why? Why does the body not need the teaching? Huh?
Jada.
It is jada. Definitely. Jada means, it is inert. It is inert. Oh no, it is the mind that needs it. Mind is also inert. It is blessed by consciousness, blessed by Atma, the light of Atma. Oh, okay. So the light of Atma needs the teaching. Give me a break. Satchidananda Atma needs teaching. You are Satchidananda? Tell me. All knowing Atma needs the teaching? No. Then we are in a quandary. Who is being taught? It's not the body. It's not the body mind sense complex. And it's not the indweller of the body mind sense complex either, which is the, Nitya Buddha Shuddha Mukta Atma, the ever free, the eternal, infinite, all knowing Atma. If it's all knowing, it doesn't need teaching. Then who is being taught? Where is this ajnanam sitting? You know? And then the answer is what? Prashtuhu Swarupe. You know, it is in the nature of the one asking the question. Who is asking the question? Where is the ajnanam? And who is being taught? So the one asking the question centered on the I notion of the one asking the question indeed is what? This ajnanam. Or is the one that is needing where the ajnanam needs to be dispelled. And who is that? This is the I notion, ahankara. Ahankara is what is needing the teaching. And so the ahankara is what is quote unquote enlightened, and the ahankara is, ajnana nivritti takes place for the ahankara, and the ahankara which was reigning, not what is happening outside, reigning, that not that kind of reigning. Here, ruling over the body, the mind, the senses, and all the ways in which, all the statuses. I am Pramata. Pramata means what? Knower. Nyata, knower. And then Karta, doer. I'm an agent. And then after Karta, what happens? Bhokta. I'm done in. I'm the experiencer of other people's doings. Karta, Bhokta, Pramata. And then you can say, what else? Manta, thinker. Any word that ends in er, you can think of eater, drinker, sleeper, waker, dreamer, thinker, all these things. The ahankara is attached to all these identities. And then, what does Vedanta do? Vedanta shows that this light of the teaching, shows that in fact the ahankara is free, unattached and uninvolved with any of these statuses. The statuses are an as though projection. Even the ahankara is an as though projection of the atma. The statuses are an as though projection of the atma. And then, really speaking, nothing is intrinsic to the atma at all. This is what the whole thing is. This is what has to be understood. And so this ahankara has to be divested of its identity. And in the initial stages of Vedanta study, that is what is happening for everyone. That's why you feel like jumping. That's why you feel like hugging everyone. And that's why there is this newfound sense of accommodation. A newfound sense of, warm, loving feeling inside like melting chocolate. Very nice. Ooey gooey feeling, wonderful. Yes. What happens to it? It does not last. And instead of the teaching, taking care of the ahankara says, I'm going to take care of this teaching and put it in a zone. Yeah. Why? Because the rest of the time I want to zone out. There is puja zone, there is work zone, and then what else? Then there is relaxing zone. Yeah. Watching TV, talking to friends, etc. Relaxing zone, going shopping, all these things. And then there is Advaita zone. Yeah. Because to be a Vedantin 24/7/365 is very daunting for the ahankara. Because the stupid ahankara thinks. What does it think? It thinks that I have to put effort into this. It doesn't know that it's its own swarupa, it's effortless. It's heard it and it said, yeah, and it is not believing in that. It's not seeing that fully. It's not seeing that fully. And then, as a result, what is it doing? It's having so many doubts. The ahankara is having doubts about the knowledge. Pramanagata samshayaha, doubts centered on the means of knowledge. Why only through this I have to know? Why can't I breathe out the samsara? Breathe in the moksha. Ah. Yeah, there are some spiritual people who do this. Air is free, okay? Yeah. Air is free. Breathing is an involuntary mechanism. Yet, to breathe out the samsara costs $750 per weekend session. So anyhow, this is what is very interesting, because the ahankara, is when it starts to feel that it's losing a footing. That's what Vedanta does. Vedanta shakes up the ahankara. And the ahankara doesn't know whether it's just like you blindfold. Sometimes we used to do this as children. It was a blind man's buff one game. One child is blindfolded and it's made to turn around quickly. And then, okay, catch the other people. You use the sounds and catch the other people, And it's like a game of tag, but blindfolded. The ahankara in the beginning is like that. It doesn't know where it's going. It feels lost. And one thing the ahankara hates is feeling totally out of control. That's terrible. It wants to be in charge all the time. And that's why it likes naming things and compartmentalizing. Advaita zone, Vedanta zone, no Vedanta zone. Yeah. And then if it is told, there is only one zone. It's all Advaita alone. There is no puja zone, there is no food zone, there is no foodie zone, there is no shopping zone, there is no mall zone, there is no, what else, work zone, there is no gossip zone, there is no eating, drinking zone. It's all just one non-dual, entire whole. That's all that there is. The ahankara says, ugh, it is very, very, very scary. And if you're scared, you have to do sharanagati further to the Guru, to the, Bhagavan, to the book itself, the scriptures, the Shruti. But instead, the ahankara says, I am the one who wants to take over everything. Now has come something called this Advaita, which sounded good, but now it is taking over me. And I am not going to allow it. But then, the ahankara is powerless because there is a jignasa like the fire burning. The fire of wanting this knowledge is burning in the heart, and the ahankara is kind of helpless because it is stored. There is a dharma sankata. It is a conflict. There is some kind of a thing. I do want this, but but then having it all the time from all ways in every way. What about the rest of my life? How will it be transformed? How can I do this? This is so scary. This is what happens after the period of study of Vedanta. And the ahankara, who is in charge says, I got this. Don't worry. Oh, how did you get this? What are you going to do? What is the solution? Put Vedanta in the zone. I told you, that is the solution. So the jigyasa is covered. When? 5:30 to 7:30. Yeah. Now you are in the Vedanta zone. When you walked in the room, Vedanta zone. You compose your face and you remember, yes, I am a Vedanta in, meaning I am coming in Vedanta. Then after 7:30, क्या होता है? Vedanta out. Yeah. This is what the whole thing is. And then there is a kind of a truce. There is a uneasy truce between the split ahankara, between that part, that area of the ahankara that is naturally dying for this knowledge, really really wanting this knowledge, and the ahankara who wants the status quo. I don't want to be. Being a Vedantin is a lot of pressure. Somebody told me this. I said, Ayyo, this is supposed to be no pressure. No, it's a lot of pressure. So then, I also don't keep quiet. I said, why is it pressure? Please tell me. It is pressure because I have to be good all the time. I can't have fun. I can't be bad. I can't, I have to just do everything like this. So therefore, I like compartments. Moksha should be nicely corralled within a compartment. Next to that, mocha from Starbucks. Yeah. This is how it should be. And then so the ahankara convinces itself and, placates that part which is the jignasu of the Mundakopanishad, whose head is on fire, whose hair is on fire. And when the head is on fire, you go straight to the quickest available body of water, correct? If the hair is on fire, you don't say, well, let me Google, which is a nice lake. Because every other body of water, any body of water I don't want. Even a ditch is okay if your head is on fire, but you don't have time to Google and see which is a nice body of water. And then idhar or udhar ke beech mein kya hai? Is there a Starbucks? Because I'm a little thirsty, I think I'd like a little drink on the way. You don't do that. You head straight to any pond or ditch or some sludge, doesn't matter. You have to douse the head and get rid of this burning sensation. Correct? And so here the ahankara has hijacked this burning sensation, this burning desire of knowledge, and has said, don't worry. What? I'll give you moksha. Oh, you will give me moksha? Yes. But what? I thought that was the Guru's job. I thought that was the Shastra's job to give moksha. You are going to give me moksha? Don't worry. I got this. I got this. I have this. Don't worry. And so, what is the formula now? What's going to happen? The formula is very simple. Little bit of samsara, little bit of moksha. Yes. This is like a buffet. A wonderful smorgasbord. There is such a word, right? I heard it somewhere. What does it mean? Buffet? Yeah. Yeah, so mean. Like a combo of all kinds of things. It's a little buffet. And in this buffet, there is all kinds of confusing things are there. You don't even know what to eat. Forget what to eat first and what to eat last and what to eat in the middle. You just don't know what to eat. And sometimes it is multi-cuisine. Suddenly some Chinese dishes will be there. And you have to hope that there is nothing that had swum or crawled or flown, in that. Because everything looks brown, you don't know. And then, and then there is our, of course, staple, rasam, sambar, all the things you can recognize. And then there is some other, casserole. Some things. So many things are there. And then the heart is happy. Ahankara is happy because there's a... And then the ahankara channels its own Upanishad. Really? How can the ahankara channel an Upanishad? Well, it does. Oh, really? What is its name? Samsara Upanishad. Yeah. That is the name of the ahankara's Upanishad. Ahankara has authored an Upanishad, so to speak, Then it is told it cannot author an Upanishad because that which does not have an author is the Upanishad. So it says, okay. It modifies and it says, I have channeled the Upanishad, and that Upanishad's name is, how to be in samsara happily. While also just looking at moksha. You just do, like recently we had that, what is it? That auspicious star darshanam. Ardra nakshatra. Ardra nakshatra is, auspicious to see. A few weeks back, 2-3 weeks back, we had this Ardra darshanam. So like that you have, once a year, or, once, or whenever a Swami rolls into town, you have moksha darshanam, Vedanta zone. 5:30 to 7:30. And then after that, what? Back to samsara. And you see, it's almost foolproof. Because then the split, ahankara, the one that wants moksha, the one that whose head is on fire, cannot complain at all. Because the other one will bully it and say, didn't I take you to Vedanta class? Shut up. Yeah. And this time many Vedanta classes. Shut up. So you have to compromise now. You have 5 days. 5 days of classes. 2 hours that too. And I need a knife. And so we did what you wanted. And now you have to go along with what I want. What do you want? I just want to be free. But that's what I also want. The other one tries to say. Your moksha is very boring. Why? Because I told you it's a lot of pressure. You have to be samatvam all the time. You have to be the same. Samatvam yoga uchyate. You have to be the same. Very boring. I don't want all this. Little bit of moksha, little bit of samsara. Or to put it in Kathopanishad's words, little bit of shreyas, which is the most exalted pursuit in life, aka moksha, little bit or a lot of prayers. Now, if you say, I want prayers, all you're saying is, please pray for us. That's all. There is no other thing, no other possibility. Yeah. Prayers means that which is pleasing, that which looks nice, that which is wonderful. This is what is prayers. But that's what I want. Says who? One part of the ahankara. Ahankara is also having a split. And prayers is finite. It's wonderful, but it is finite. Anything that you pursue destructs, is nashvara, subject to destruction. And therefore, the one who pursues prayers, the Kathopanishad tells without, mincing any words, is called mandaha. What's the meaning of mandaha? Slightly dull. Dull with regard to what? With regard to discernment of priorities in life. This is the dullness. Not developmentally challenged, emotionally challenged perhaps, spiritually definitely challenged, and discernment wise challenged because always picks the wrong, thing. Picks that which is finite. What's wrong with picking the finite? Nothing wrong. Please continue to pick the finite, but stop wanting the infinite. That's all. If you can stop wanting the infinite, then there is nothing wrong in picking repeatedly the finite. But you cannot stop wanting the infinite. Half the head, because the ahankara is the whole head, so half the head is always on fire. And so what? One enters into unholy pacts of what? Zoning out the rest of the time, doing whatever one wants under the name of freedom, and then, having a little bit of a Vedanta zone. Nobody is really happy ultimately with this state of affairs. Because I want the whole. I want everything. And one wants to be free, not for 5 minutes, but all the time. And this so-called freedom that you get through prayers is fraught with a lot of dysfunctionality and codependency. And that's very, very evident. Because the so-called freedom of going somewhere, for example, going to see a movie, you have to negotiate with so many people. First you have to find somebody who will go with you, because what's the fun in going alone? And then, and then you have to convince, them to see this movie as opposed to some other movie. Maybe they want to see some horror movie and you want to see this non-horror movie, and you have to negotiate. And those that are being left behind perhaps in the house, then you have to promise them some treats and do some things, and then you have to compromise there also. Where is the freedom here? When life itself is a horror show, why horror movie? So like this is, so as a result of this, what happens? As a result of this state of affairs, it is, you cannot think of, before I talk about this, one more thing I want to point out. You cannot think that this state of affairs is healthy. It is not. It is driving a deep wedge between the you that is, Sat, Chit, Ananda, the one that is yearning for this understanding, Sat, Chit, Ananda, and the one that is, somehow afraid to really, see this yearning. That's why it is going for prayers. Shreyas is, not understood. Shreyas is the import of Shreyas in one's life is not understood. That's why prayers predominates, preponderates. And therefore, there is a permanent split in the person. It's not that one is happy with this formula. Vedanta zone, no Vedanta zone, Advaita 5:30 to 7:30, Dvaita, 7:30 to the next 5:30. One is not happy with that. Because there is that desire for moksha is an uncultivated desire. Unlike cable TV or so many other things, it's an uncultivated desire. It is already there and it has to be taken care of, and the human life alone is there to take care of it. And then if one is not happy with this, what happens is that, there is some kind of a literally zoning out that happens. We have Vedantin zombies. That's what this state of affairs creates. You go through the motions. You sit in front of the teacher. You study. Then you go home to your safe non-Vedanta zone. And then what? You get up in the morning, go to work, come back, listen to one more lecture, study. फिर उसके बाद क्या? As usual, samsara. This is what is called samsaropanishad. An Upanishad whose subject matter is how to stay in samsara, how to cling on to samsara. This is what it is. You don't have to cling on to samsara, it clings on to you. And it creates this split, is never happy because this dvaita is felt within. It's one thing to say there is dvaita surrounding me, but then this dvaita is within. And so there is a shutting down that happens, midway through one's spiritual unfoldment, through one's spiritual blossoming. When the heart is just ready to blossom, this ahankara that wants to be in charge says, shut up. Don't you see you have so many, and it will give you very good reasons. Don't you see that you have responsibilities? Don't you see that you're married? Don't you see that you have children? And if the children are grown up, it will say, don't you see you have grandchildren? If you don't have grandchildren, it will say, see, isn't it a problem? See why you don't have grandchildren? Think about that. Don't forget about all this. Think about all the duties. Think about all these things you have to do. And why do you need all this? You've studied enough. Enough means you have attended one retreat. Enough. Yeah, crash course. Vedanta crash course. बस से बहुत हो गया. अभी क्या करोगे? What will you do? Enough. And so there is a shutting down. As soon as one is ready for the heart to blossom, there is a kind of a shutting down that happens. Very, very, very important to see this. And then sadly, but truthfully, this shutting down is very subtle and not even noticeable. You think you're fine, you think you're happily going to the Vedanta class. And yet, when you're alone at night just before falling asleep, you wonder why it's not making any change in me. Before, Vedanta was so transformative. Every text I studied, every sentence of any mantra of any of the Upanishads would just speak to me. What do I need to do, here? Option A, fire the Guru, fire the teacher. Find another teacher. Option B, fire the Upanishad. So, exactly. This is useless Upanishad. Dhiras tatra shochati. Silly thing. Keeps on saying that Dhira doesn't feel sad and Atmavit shokam tarati, etc. So find some other Upanishad. This is what the option B. Fire the Upanishad, find some other way. And option C, Upanishad means what? Fire Vedanta itself. Very ominous options. It's back? It's on? Yeah. Yeah, see, it talked about how dire the situation is. It's giving a warning. Yeah, giving a warning. It's a very dire situation. So fire the Upanishad, fire the teacher means what? Fire Vedanta, that's what it is. And then, Bahushakha hi anantascha buddhayah avyavasayina. For those that are not able to make this a priority, then options open up. In fact, the less you know, the more the options. And then, you can say, I can breathe out the samsara, breathe in the moksha, and then I can go do this, I can do that, and I can still, get this or that. One becomes, susceptible to sycophants. All this is said in the Bhagavad Gita. Yamimam pushpitam vacham. Flowery talk. They are very convincing. Oh, come to me. What will you do? I will give you moksha. How will you give me moksha? Don't worry, I'll teach you some meditation. I'll teach you this, I'll teach you that. Or just do seva. To whom? To me, of course. And then you'll get moksha. Or money is the root of all samsara. Therefore what? You need vairagya. How do I get vairagya? Give me all your money, simple. Let me relieve you of your possessions, and then you will have vairagya. How these kinds of sycophants, and then these kinds of flowery talk, wrong thinking. Now I sound like I'm in a karaoke. I'm hearing of course, some kind of an effect. I think it's gone now. Has it gone? Yeah. So this is, Yam imam pushpitam vacham. This is kind of flowery things, And what do they say? And who are these people? Avipashtitaha. They are not vipashchit. Vipashchit means they're not knowledgeable. They don't know Vedanta. Why? Why did you go to them? Because you have fired Vedanta. That's why you have gone to them. And then, and who are these people? Vedavada rataha. And they are committed to whatever they are committed. Any body of knowledge that they are committed. Like Purva Mimamsa and, Sankhya, so many things in the past which used to be. Some darshanas. They are committed to a certain way of looking at the world and then they want to drag you to that way. And then Vedavadarataha. And then what do they say? Na anyadasti iti vadinaha. They say nothing else is there. This is my way and this is your way and no other way exists. One is hijacked from Vedanta. And really speaking, one becomes vulnerable to kamatmanaha, swargaparaha, things like that. People are, what is that, swargapara, or committed to swarga, committed to this or committed to that, and one gets lost. So it's a very dire predicament. And so if one is asking the question, or any semblance of the question, iteration of the question, what is the question? After so many years of letting this Vedanta in, how come there are no changes in me? How come it is business as always? How come I have not transformed? If you are asking the question, then the text that we are about to study is for you. If you are not asking the question, you can leave in the break. You have a 5-minute break because it's a long class and then there is a little program also afterwards. So it's nice to, get up and stretch and everything. So, one is still, however, let me caution, one is still in the Vedanta zone because I'm not going to say the closing prayer on purpose because it's a short break. Then we come back, just take 5 minutes to stretch, walk around, do whatever we need. We'll come back and look at the text. Oh, that's it. Pay attention to what constitutes Vedanta zone and non-Vedanta zone. A lot of things become very clear when we pay attention. So, in the Vedanta zone, there is a sense of a peace. In the non-Vedanta zone, that peace is not mandatory. In fact, I can be the one who causes the cacophony. I don't have to be peaceful at all. And then in the Vedanta zone, there is some kind of a decorum. In the non-Vedanta zone, that decorum is, not followed. The decorum is not followed in the non-Vedanta zone because it is seen like I've been there, done this. This is 5:30 to 7:30, but this is 7:32, and so therefore, I can yell at somebody else because that was then. This is now. Now it is not Vedanta zone anymore, and then the ahankara takes over and says, "Come on, do Vedanta, Shmedanta. What can you do? You need to, you need to yell. You need to, get your way. You need to, otherwise somebody will take advantage of you. You have to do this. You have to get this. You have to make things happen. Who will pay the bills?" Very important question asked by the ahankara, which scares the other side of the ahankara, and so therefore all these things, this is all a very, these are all very sort of telltale, schisms, gaps between the so-called Vedanta zone and the non-Vedanta zone. These are some of the things that, we can notice. What else have you noticed in your life? Anyone wants to share? what happens in the non-Vedanta zone. Of course, nobody wants to share this. Suddenly it dawned on me, okay, why will anyone want to share? So, doesn't matter, don't share. The another way in which, this Veda, what mediates or what separates this Vedanta zone and non-Vedanta zone, really speaking, is behaving in accordance to what is talked about in the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita as Jnani Lakshana. The Lakshanas of the Jnani, as elucidated in the second chapter of the latter portion of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, for example, become the sadhanas for the Jnani wannabe. Simple, correct? And so, prajahati yada kaman, sarvan manogatan kaman yada prajahati. And then what? The one who gives up the thoughts, even the thought of the desire, forget the desire itself, thought of the desire. I think a chocolate cake feels good right about now. Even that thought is given up as it occurs in the mind. For whom? The jnani. Yeah. And I can do it, but for 2 hours I can do it. So in a way, the Vedanta zone means what? There I'm, practicing or trying to be like the jnani or like the person of knowledge described in the Upanishads and the other Shrutis, including the Bhagavad Gita, other works. I'm trying to be like this. And that's why there is a lot of pressure because I can't be like this all the time. So then the answer, therefore, wrong answer here is to cut oneself off from that and have certain kind of ways. But then it is, the Bhagavad Gita also has a word for that kind of a behavior. In chapter 3, Lord Krishna calls a person who is parading as a jnani without being a jnani as a mithyachara. An imposter, a pretender, an interloper, the one who is really not this but this, pretending to be this. And here is where the waters get very muddied. Because Pujya Swamiji unabashedly said, fake it and make it. Mm-hmm. So if I am to fake it and make it, and then Lord Krishna is calling me a fake for faking it, where do I go then? Lord Krishna is not calling one a fake for, If you fake it without making it, then it's a fake. That is what has to be understood. And so therefore, this kind of a gap cannot be maintained for too long. It's not that trying to be a Vedantin is creating pressure. It's this, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of split personality that is creating the pressure. And so when, as I said in the last, session just now, when we have this time period of studying the teaching, but nothing is happening, there is no transformation, there is no initial, kind of a aha, is gone. The honeymoon period with the Shruti is over. That is when this text is a antidote to this particular, rampant feeling, which is like a kind of a jaded, faded feeling. I'm a jaded, faded jiva. I'm a jaded, faded Vedanti. And nothing more is possible. And the Ahankara is convinced, who will get moksha? Come on. And then the Ahankara unfortunately also knows some Bhagavad Gita by now. And it starts to quote Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye. Out of thousands of people, oh Arjuna, Lord Krishna himself said, come on. One, one yatati, one tries even. And out of thousands of people who are, searching in the proper way, any one person, Vedti, one person knows me as the truth of themselves. Why bother? So this is where we need some kind of a very big intervention. What is that for? Because this is really like an intervention in these addictive situations, like these alcohol, drugs, etc. The family members will get together and then they will make a pact and then they will have a rehab center already located for the person to check into. The car is waiting outside, the driver is waiting outside. And before this person runs, the person is finally convinced, and in that one weak moment when they are convinced, they are put in the car and sent to the rehab. They agree and then they are sent away. And everybody tells them, look, we don't want you to destroy yourself. We don't want this to happen to you. We see that, this particular, whatever the substance is causing havoc in your life, in your, decisions, in your relationships, in your goals, ambitions, career, anything. So this has got to stop, and we are going to take some measures to do this, and we want you to cooperate. And this is what the author of this text is telling all of us, so to speak. Very ingeniously written, a beautiful, beautiful text. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.